500 million years ago, terra firma, dry land, was rich in untapped resources. So this likely drove very strong selection pressure for those individuals that could make the leap from aquatic systems to dry land to exploit those riches. So what are the advantages of colonizing dry land? First off, if you've ever been scuba diving, the first 20 feet of your dive in the water column is the best part. It's richest in colors. Below 20 feet, and red gets filtered out. Below 50 feet, and orange is gone. By the time you get down to about 100 feet, the world is purple and deep blue. Why? Because the water column is filtering out the different wavelengths of light in a predictable fashion. So by colonizing dry land, the first plants now had access to the full spectrum of light that their algal ancestors had blocked out at varying depths. Another advantage, the atmosphere has a lot more CO2, carbon dioxide, at least relative to aquatic systems. Carbon dioxide, of course, is needed for photosynthesis in order to synthesize glucose. And then lastly, those ancient soils likely provided a rich source of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that are limiting in aquatic systems. Colonizing dry land, it also presented unique physical challenges. So charophytes are going to spend their entire lives immersed in water. Thus, water is readily available when required for photosynthesis. The first plants had to deal with water limitations for the first time. Suddenly, they were beholden to the next rain. And if you'll permit me to go back to our scuba analogy, I'll probably likely never have the chance to go to space. You might, but I won't. I'll never get to feel what it feels like to experience zero gravity. But when scuba diving, one does feel weightless in the water column when their buoyancy is correct. So aquatic systems, they're going to provide structural support, allowing charophytes to grow large without investing heavily in structural scaffolding. The first land plants now had to deal with the full weight of gravity in the absence of that support from that water. Thus, the first land plants were small. They were simple bryophytes. Vascular systems with roots and xylem and phloem, they're not going to evolve for another 50 million years. Another strong piece of evidence that points to the charophytes as the ancestors of land plants is the presence of sporopollenin in charophytes as well as in all of the extant land plants. So sporopollenin is a durable polymer that builds the tough outer walls of plant spores, as well as pollen grains and encasing zygotes. The evolution of this macromolecule was key in allowing plants to colonize dry land and prevent their precious spores and zygotes from desiccating. Have you ever wondered why seasonal allergies make us so miserable? It's because our sinuses are being bombarded by these teeny little, what look to be like medieval weapons. So those are pollen granules, and they're evolved to adhere to the sticky stigmas of flowering plants. But they also cause major irritation in the epithelial tissue and our respiratory tracts. The outer walls of those pollen granules, they're constructed with sporopollenin. But please note here that the first plants, the bryophytes, they don't have pollen. Pollen is the male gametes of flowering plants. That's going to evolve much, much later, some 300 million years later. But to reiterate the main point from this slide, only charophytes and a handful of other algae possess sporopollenin, a key characteristic of all land plants that prevents both their spores and their zygotes from drying out. So here's a simple phylogenetic tree that's going to show the various lineages that leads us to plants. So on the top, we have the multicellular red algae. This is the chlorophytes, the other lineage of green algae, like the sea lettuce that you see here. Here are the charophytes, the green algae that we're quite familiar with now. And then the closest charophyte relative, Zygnema, which is actually a freshwater species, and it represents the most recent common ancestor of all the embryophytes in the kingdom Plantae.